So hi, today is here Florian again, and I have today a new guest, so please introduce yourself.
Hi Florian, it's Kirsten Oppenländer. I'm a managing director at Deutsche Bank in charge of innovation and design for commercial clients' business.
Awesome. So my first question for you is, what is innovation for you?
That's actually an interesting question because I think innovation is such a broad topic. I personally believe you can obviously find structured ways to innovate. However, my previous experiences, in particular with the change in the ecosystem and technology, is that it's more collaborative approach. So getting different people, different backgrounds, different industries, different types of people together and have them brainstorm over topics. And then I noticed that a lot of times you come up with really cool stuff. And obviously the other part to innovation is it needs to be client-centric. You cannot just, like we did in the old days, put together a product where you think the client will love it and then end up noticing no one actually wants it. So doing the classic customer journey experience, focusing on client first is, in my idea, what brings you to the best innovative solutions these days.
Awesome. So the Deutsche Bank is like a really big bank, really powerful, but I wouldn't think on innovation if I hear the name Deutsche Bank. So how is the experience for you to bring innovation into the daily business or into the business itself?
Mm-hmm. Again, that's a very mixed bag of goods, I would say, and there is a reason why you wouldn't probably see Deutsche Bank as so innovative, and probably that would account for some of the other banks as well. How come? Obviously, we have to cater for a lot of regulations. So if you look at some of the recent regulatory changes, be it the MiFID in the security space, be it now something that sort of affects all of us, the new data protection laws, obviously we need to ensure that all our processes are aligned. Also, the kind of security focus we have on technology is something that doesn't make you as fast, because today innovation always comes with the tech fast. However, Deutsche has always been known for its innovative product franchise. I've just been reading an article about our new COO, and if you look at some of the products that we've been broaching already in the 90s, some of which still exist but are still state-of-the-art, you see a lot of innovation has come. If you look at the role we're playing in certain fields, mainly in the transaction banking space, for instance, you see innovation has always been a constant. However, what you would find now is if you look at our retail positioning, we come up with a lot more solutions that are modern, that are much more innovative. I've been discussing, we were just discussing about our InnoLabs, the innovation labs that we have across the world. We've been discussing yesterday at Bitkom around the ecosystem Deutsche has been putting together, and someone said now that he's understood all the different pieces, it brings a very nice puzzle together on how we're scouting the market, on how we're looking at potential to use new technology, new solutions within the bank, and then to bring that out. However, what we're not doing any longer is building those mega solutions. So we're really trying, like everyone else right now, probably trying the MVP solution first and then decide what we want to bring to market.
Awesome. So how does your daily business look like?
I get that question very regularly, and I have to admit I don't have that any longer, frankly. I'm actually looking forward to tomorrow, because tomorrow is probably a typical office day where I meet the team, where I get updates on a lot of the programs that are running, and where I sort of, tidy up everything that's been happening. But if I look at the last few weeks, I'm actually traveling a lot. Not the fancy stuff that everyone would now think, wow, she's out in the valley and stuff. I'm traveling a lot to our branches right now, so we're doing little educational days with the commercial client sales force. So bringing technology, bringing new solutions to them, and letting them literally play with new solutions as well. So that takes time. Then obviously Bitkom yesterday and today. In between a lot of ecosystem meetings, really. So what we're trying is whenever we have someone who has a cool idea, my team and I try to meet the people, understand the solution, see what the value add is. And then obviously being a big organization, you also have the mandatory stuff, be it financial planning, be it governance meetings, so all of that. But really no standard agenda.
So if you say, like, you see a lot of innovative ideas. So what would you say was the idea which most fascinates you or you most admire? Maybe a startup or an idea?
I think that's a challenge because to name one would immediately, discount others. What I find fascinating is obviously I see some of them more on the client side than on the partner side. Some of them I see on both angles. What I find amazing is the food startups. Yeah. If you look at, we have a couple there that we also broached at NOAA last year, I think it was. When you look at how people take a completely known product and just redo something about it. I was probably one of the very first My Muesli users in Germany, and I liked the concept from day one. Yeah, and I also, what I find amazing is the diversity. If you look at some of the founding teams, you have like literally kids, and then you talk to them, and they are so into their idea, they are so grown up already, and then you find very mature founders who again bring something completely different to the table. So it's really it's such a variety that it's it really the entire ecosystem is so amazing, and that's what makes it really challenging to then also decide what you do. I think the other thing is if you look at successful company builders, for instance, take FinLeap's story. Yeah? As someone from the finance industry, obviously you can't be in Berlin not looking at FinLeap. I find it amazing about how they bring out the ideas and then how they nurture them and mature them and bring them to market. And those to me are really cool examples. And then also having gotten to know some of the founder teams, they are so professional. And that also to me is you have cool ideas, you have cool tech, but you also need the professionals, no matter where they come from, no matter what diversity they bring to the table, but that professionalism, I think, is what I do admire as well. Yeah.
So the next question, which would be interesting to know, is you have a startup you really like, and you say, okay, that would be really helpful for Deutsche Bank.
Yeah.
And then you approach the government's part. What is the strategy there, like to break boundaries and to make things happen?
That's actually pretty simple. The first meeting we had, we have the so-called new product approval process, where also any startup cooperation needs to go through. When I actually joined the very first one, when I took the role, I was in a meeting and I had the feeling I had lots of hostile people around me. And then they asked the first few questions, and I noticed no one had ever taken the time to explain to them the entire picture. Yeah. So every single project goes there and tells them that they have the best product idea ever. And then with all the bits and pieces happening right now, it's very difficult to get the big picture. So the first thing that I did is actually explain the big picture. I explained to them what I personally see where we're heading towards. Also explain to them, obviously things are changing, so you can't carve that in stone. But they got the basic understanding of where we're heading, and based on that, it was much easier for them to start understanding what it is that we need and to then go through. Also, I mean, my team at times like, we need to go through the process again. But frankly, I mean, number one, it's non-negotiable. Number two, what we found out when we did the first startup cooperations, our IT security team obviously then scans the partner, and for one of them they found out that they had some glitches in the way they had set up their site. So we spoke to them, and I think within hours they had that fixed. But that, to me, was a win-win situation, yeah? Because, I mean, the last thing you would need, also when it gets known that you're working with Deutsche, I mean, we've seen this with a couple of names also when they had the big funding rounds. All of a sudden, you're right in the middle of DDoS without even knowing it, yeah? So basically, those are the kind of things where I notice you need to talk to people, and you need to look, I mean, it's like everywhere else, you need to look at things from their angle. We had a very funny situation for one of the cooperations where the audit guys obviously told us, well, if you have access to that system, you need an audit trail. There. Then the data protection guys were like, yeah, hang on, but that system is outside the realms of Deutsche, so I don't want that to be audit trailed because someone from the pattern could think back to who are our clients and who are not.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. So the good thing was the vendor had an audit trail, obviously, and they could switch it off. Yeah. So I said, okay, guys, I have it, I can switch it off, but there is no in between, so you guys decide. And obviously now we have an audit trail, and no, you cannot deduct who's the end client and who not. But those are the kind of processes that I think when the right people then sit together and discuss what the concerns are and what from a regulatory, from a data protection perspective are the right steps, you're right into things.
Yeah, makes sense. So like the first step is always to make clear where they are in the whole picture of Deutsche Bank, and then you need to get the security straight, and then you're probably starting to testing internally with customers of you, and then like typical KPIs, like key performance indications, make clear how you go on.
Yeah, exactly.
So does the Deutsche Bank normally invest in the startups right away, or give them just contracts, or what's your strategy there?
That's very different. That really depends on what the startup is about. I mean, someone who doesn't need a funding round, even if we wanted to invest, they wouldn't take the money. That's simple, yeah. If we invest in any startup, that's okay. If we start investing in a fintech, obviously we're seen as a strategic investor. Yeah. Now that is something that a fintech has to decide whether they are at a stage where they want a strategic investor, because then normally it's more difficult to get a hold of further venture capital. So those are sort of the first trade-offs you need to cover anyways. Obviously, if we do partner with someone, normally we are checking whether we want to invest, because if it gets known we're partnering with someone, and normally you would see an uptick in the market value. However, there is areas where we believe, in the fintech scene, say, there is limited reason for us to go into things too far. Why? From a certain percentage onwards, obviously, our internal processes would possibly apply, which is something that you wouldn't want in the very early days of the startup. So you need to take that in mind. And then there is stuff where we say, we want a cooperation, but we're not investing. So what I've been saying is, from loose partnering up to we're buying this, everything is possible. We've done a few investments, and we're checking it for almost everything that we're doing, but it's not something that's a prerequisite. Rather the opposite. If we have a cool target that we want to cooperate with, because we believe the solution's really cool for our clients, if they don't need us as an investor at that stage, that's also okay.
Yeah, makes sense. So if you say you're like cooperative startups or you work with startups, the main complaint you hear from startups is like, the big companies are too slow and too complicated. You're probably aware of this problem, of course. Do you have tactics or ideas or strategies how you try to solve this or make it better?
Yes. That was actually, and the reason why I can be so really clear on this is, I was at a conference last year jointly with one of our partners, and on stage he complimented us on being faster than he had expected, which already I think was a compliment, and was the guy is he's really straight, so he wouldn't have said that if he didn't believe in it. Why can we be faster? In part, and I'm not saying we're fast, we're not. We've changed the model. So we have a standard process now, and we're piloting everything that we do. And if you pilot it and don't look at IT integration in the first instance, we can be much faster. Yeah, because you start small and slow. So if we have a typical cooperation, we're sort of testing it in some of the branches, and our relationship managers simply approach our clients if they believe there is a good case there. So you can get the feedback from everyone. You have the landing page of the startup, and then you see what kind of traffic you generate, both in terms of leads and real business. So that helps us in the initial phase to speed up. Also, what we said is, I don't renegotiate the terms and conditions if I order via Amazon. So what we said is we have a generic contract, which I believe is a fair contract. However, it also accommodates all the requirements that you would have as a regulated bank. So that is the standard contract, and we're not negotiating that. In the first instance, when we did that sounded a bit harsh. Obviously, you negotiate the numbers, but everything else we're not negotiating. Why? Unless there is a reason why because the other party is also regulated and there is something that doesn't match. We said, in order to also provide everyone the same opportunity, this is the contract, and you agree or you don't. So you also take the time of contract negotiation out of the system. And then obviously if that thing grows, you can still reconsider whether that's the right approach. But that helps us to speed up. And one of the other things, that's actually what I spoke about last night at Bitkom, is one of the challenges I think the entire industry is facing is everything we're doing with partners, it has to be checked against outsourcing requirements. And depending on what we do, say we're using an external cloud or we're using a vendor's API, that implies I need to check it. And if you just assume that you're a pretty successful fintech or a cloud service provider and you have more banks as customers, you can organize tours, because you will have every other day the security guys, the IT reps, the reg reps of your individual counterparts who are checking your systems because they have to. So one of the things that, we'd started, there is a discussion at Bitkom fortunately already, but that we started discussing last night as well. Why can you not have certificates, certified solutions that sort of have a regulatory approved stamp where someone obviously needs to audit this, but not every single partner, because that would actually help not only in the initial due diligence, but also going forward.
Okay, so the idea is like what you do to speed up your processes. You ask first your clients just like that, get feedback, and then you have a standard contract which probably says, okay, if this happens, we get this money under these conditions, and then the last step is that you're starting to integrate it into your systems. And before that, there would be a good idea to have kind of a standardizations of the systems of the startup to make this process also faster, because otherwise you need to check into their IT and then figure out if it's compliance to rules. Okay, cool, awesome. So the finance sector has the interesting thing that like it's changing right now really a lot. So a big question is, what do you think where we are in 5 years? How does the finance sector look in 5 years?
If only I knew. It's actually a very interesting question, and I think there is a couple components to the question. Number one is technology. You look at technology standalone in 5 years, the question is for what normal people know as banking business, would you need a branch? I don't know. However, you also have the human component, And if I look at what I see around me, is obviously the easy one is to look at the different generations. Yeah, why would a digital native go to a bank? Not so sure. In the earlier generations, what I've been noticing a lot is you have people who don't trust technology, who are concerned about data protection, security. I mean, money, in particular in Germany, I think, money is number one, something you don't talk about. And number two is something you're pretty particular about. And then you have those who are not as tech privy, but who don't want to sort of confirm that and who pretend that they have data protection concerns. Okay. So to me, you have quite a lot of people out there who would still bank in the traditional ways. Yeah. So I think the challenge to banking, number one, is, in particular, if you're a premium brand, you need to cater for different channels for different people. Yeah. And probably also for a digital native, let's just assume the odd one out there eventually still does want to buy a house or a flat. That may happen. The question is, would you really want to do such a huge investment online? Some would, and others would probably at that point appreciate the personal interaction. Yeah. And based on that, what I think is what is important and what you would find in 5 years. Number one, you will have hopefully more platformication, because having 10, 20, 30 different apps to cater for your financials doesn't sound a really compelling case. Yeah. So number one, you would probably find 1, 2, maximum 3 different platforms that cater for your financial needs. And that's on the retail space. I think once you start looking into commercial clients' business, that will again look different. You will absolutely, in 5 years' time, I'm very convinced that's the case, you will still find branches. They will, and you notice that already, they will continue to look different. So you will have more of the lounge, of the open, transparent character that you start seeing in order to take the sort of the distance away. When you look at banking 25 years back, banks were from the outside already looking very safe, very like castles, literally, because obviously they were holding your money, needed to look safe. Now it's all very glass, light, open. I think that trend will continue. If you look at our Quartier Zukunft, you don't really notice you're in a bank, but still you can get bank advisory over a coffee, you can browse around, you can buy stuff if you like. I think that's more of the concept you would find. Okay. And then obviously the other question is, what does regulation actually allow us to do? How does that play into things? Where do you actually need physical contacts? What about registration? If you open an account today, either you do video legitimation or the good old post-ident stuff. All of that still holds true, and unless that changes, you would find a lot of those processes still, I think.
Yeah, definitely good point. Another thing which is really fascinating for me is to see that it seems to me it's like really important about platforms in the future. So like it seems like that, like for example WeChat in China, which is like a huge chat messenger, they included payment in their system and they are now standard in China. The same with Amazon. They push into your industry. How do you think about that? Like, could be this a threat, or what is your thoughts about that?
We always get asked whether we're concerned about fintech. We're not. We're cooperating, and very rightfully so. We have the big customer base, we have the trust base still, so that's a tick in the box. And I think the fintech started to look at it the same way. On the big tech side, and that I would say holds true for GAFA and everything you now see from China, that's a different story. Why? Because they have the money and the resources to just buy into a market. You see a lot of noise around PSD2 on how banks are now losing their data, Number one, it's the client's data, and number two, PSD2 also ensures that if you want to enter a market for precisely what you were just indicating, at least you need basic regulatory steps. So I think that's number one, where regulation does protect us in a way if you wanted to ask for protection. Number two, again, is what I said on data protection and what the client actually wants. I'm not so sure if you ask people in Germany, and that's our key market on the retail space, obviously, whether they wanted to pay with WhatsApp. To take the more classic German approach. And what you would probably find is, I would guess this at 1/3 would, and 2/3 would ask you whether you're like raving mad. For WeChat, I would assume right now, and that would be even stronger. On the what, really? So basically, is it a threat? Yes, absolutely. It's one of the reasons why we're actually looking into stuff like instant payments, why we've been amongst the founding partners of VeryMe in order to start putting together secure but simple platform solutions that can provide the same service, but literally really provide that in a much more secure and regulated environment.
Yeah, makes sense. So we talked a lot now about like how we see the future in 5 years. What are your goals for the next year?
For the next year, that's actually pretty simple. You mentioned fast. We need to be faster, in particular internally in delivering stuff. So we have quite a good roadmap now. I want to deliver that jointly with the team. Then obviously I need to do that in times of uncertainty. You were pointing out at all the risks out there. I think that's new for banks. If you look at the banking industry, challenges really started in the last decade with the financial crisis. Until then, it's been recently, it's been in general pretty stable. And now all of a sudden we have competition where you would have never thought you would have competition. So that's the piece you need to sort of ensure you're focusing and you're speeding up. And the other thing is obviously also internal reasons. You would know that we're close to the internal merger with Postbank. So obviously quite a lot of the internal structures will most likely change. So we need to focus on delivering the roadmap, keeping the team focused while knowing that things around us for the next years will constantly change. And what you do see is there are some people who embrace change, but there is a lot of people who are worried about change, and to embrace that culture that change is positive. And that you know, it's what brings us forward. To embrace that into the team is one of the other goals that I have for the year to come.
How do you make this sure? Like the first question, how do you make sure that like you get this culture into a bank which is probably not used to change and say, hey, let's try that. And the second question is, how do you make sure that like you got the speed inside? This was a more startup thing than like a big company thing.
Yes. I think it's focus and it's constant repetition. The good old proverb, be the change you want to see in the world. Unless you do what you expect from others, you're not seeing that. And you need to be resilient. You have days, or I have days, when I'm like, God, why is it so challenging? But then you have days where you see that it pays off, that you get positive recognition, that you see that someone is really adjusting their ways. So it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of communication, which is something that in parts, and that's the challenge we have, as the more you then communicate to the team, the more examples you build, you still need to focus also on the delivery. So it's a constant, you need to see that you get stuff done. And on the speeding up thing, again, it's also focus. You need to get senior management behind you. And once you have something that is on the broad agenda, we're pretty good in delivering. It just takes a while for it to get the green ticks so that it can get delivered.
Do you have a special tactic on a company level how you do this? Like, do you do agile methods, or how do you make sure that these things, what you said, happen?
We have actually moved at least front-end technology to Agile.
Okay.
So we have the so-called digital factory on the outskirts of Frankfurt for, I think, 1.5 years now. And the teams already work in Agile and Scrum. Some of the methods we actually already like the morning huddles and stuff, we already adapted also along the business line. What we also did is, because you can't say front-end tech is agile and back-end tech is not. You're also then not attracting junior talent there. What we did is, for new programs, they can pick and choose. So we have a loan platform program now, which normally cries waterfall. The team has agreed that they do as much agile as they can. And the IT team then drives and says, from here on, we need the good old requirements doc, but we do it jointly, and then it gets into waterfall delivery. That's actually an interesting concept. And what we noticed is you have teams that pretty much want it the old way. And right now we're leaving people the freedom. You can't force someone on programs where it's challenging to use one method over the other. So we have areas where it's very clear what you have to do, but in the gray areas we let the people decide, and that's actually quite successful. And then obviously also we're running change programs. So we have a digital academy format where we do a 2-day ecosystem accompanied by day-to-day challenges, so that you really have a theme at the end of the 2 days to get to know how Agile works, to understand new ways of collaboration. But frankly, it takes time. And then if you look at again, the banking industry and also the position Deutsche has right now, you see you need to ensure, again, that you're not losing focus. So we can't just afford 100,000 people change program. So it needs to come from every individual manager, and it's one part on the management agenda, is not the only one. But Agile and Scrum are very high on our agenda.
Okay, cool. So the next question is a bit more different. So if I am new at the Deutsche Bank and I want to become managing director, what I need to do?
Work. I've been thinking about this. Fortunately, that was one of the heads-ups that I had. I think you need to, it's actually pretty simple, and obviously it will change over time because leadership styles will also change. But I think the basic is you need to perform. You have to do a good job, and your interaction with the company and the people around you needs to be a win-win situation, needs to be give and take. Now, what I noticed in the past is people perform, and then they think they have all the rights in the world and no obligations any longer. That's not the case. You also have people who want all the rights in the first instance before they performed. That doesn't fly. And you need to be resilient. There will be pushback on your way. You need to be resilient. You need to, there is this German saying, hinfallen, aufstehen, Krone richten, weitergehen. Okay. So you need to really say, okay, mistakes will happen. You will have an environment where you're saying, well, that's not really how I would like to continue. Then change it. But be resilient. Don't give up, and just continue in your way. Lifelong learning, obviously, is an easy one, and you need to be flexible. There is, we're talking a lot about career paths. And frankly, had I stuck to in the old days there were career paths. Had I stuck to the one that was laid out for me, if I'd be a very good, very happy person and some change around me, I would probably run a small branch in North Rhine-Westphalia now. Okay. Well, not sure that would have been what I wanted, but that's what I could have done. And what I personally believe is there is only so much organizing a career. There is also a going with the flow. Okay. And once you know you're very good into your job, it's time to move on.
Okay.
You need to also foster that change in your career. If you just continue on with your role and enjoy that, you know what's happening, you have your routines, then it's a good time to move on. And that doesn't say leave the company, that implies move within the company. We have a huge internal labor market, and there is lots of potential for literally everyone.
So can we go there more specific? So we say we got into a role and we got comfortable in it. And how you approach then the next step? If you say, okay, if you're too comfortable, you should probably push for the next challenge. How you do that? Like, how do you do it in a big company?
Yep. I think big companies are easier on this one than small ones. You have regular performance reviews with your boss. And in my case, frankly, I've always been very fortunate that I had interactions with my bosses. We agreed that it would now be a good time to move on, or that they even approached me and said, listen, here is this new role. We need someone like you on this.
Okay.
And if none of the two actually happen, you can still apply in the internal labor market. You then interview like you would if you were hiring externally. And you then agree on moving to a new area. Obviously, that you need to communicate well also to your existing manager. And then what we have is, in order to make this a fair deal for everyone, you can leave your old job normally after latest 3 months.
Okay.
If your replacement can be found earlier, you can even move earlier than that. But 3 months is the norm, so that no one gets stuck, because you tend to, things have been changing, but you still have different types of managers, and some managers like to stick to what they have versus others who let good people go.
Also, like, do you more vision the end goal, or do you go really more with the flow and like with chances which come up?
Frankly, you need to look at chances.
Okay.
Everything else, frankly, when I joined the bank, people told me there is nothing here that's really constant. And if I look back at the branch where I started my apprenticeship, things are so different now. Had I thought about a fixed plan, that would have been completely destroyed probably 2 or 3 years later.
Okay.
So I think it's really looking at chances. Building your network is important, so that you have people around you, who know how good you are, and who also approach you and say, listen, I have a vacancy to fill in my team, would you be interested?
Yeah.
And that actually, in my team, that always sounds so junior, that can be on literally every single level. Take me 2 years back. I was working for one of our management board members, who then unfortunately left the bank. I helped move his office over to his successor, and then the agreement was that's it.
Yeah.
So obviously everyone said, "Wow, you're doing a cool job. We want to have you stay." But matter of fact, I needed a new role, and then literally one day after the Christmas break, my phone rang and my now boss called me and said, listen, I have a job offer, would you be interested? Yeah, so this is how it can play. Had he not called, maybe I would have found something different internally, or I would have found something externally. And I think that's the other thing. You also have to have your plan B in place.
Yeah.
And plan B is one that you have internally and one that you have externally.
Yeah.
But again, resiliency, don't just leave because today was horrible. Leave after a couple more days, weeks and months have been horrible. And before you leave, think about how you can change it from horrible to great.
Yeah, makes absolutely sense. Would you say it's different if you're a woman or a man? What is your perspective on that?
I think in parts it's easier, in parts it's more challenging.
Okay.
It was funny. I had like a workshop on group dynamics like ages back when you were still doing this stuff. And then there was something and feedback on the team, and then someone looked around and said, yeah, it's obvious we only have 2 women in the round. And then the other woman and I looked at each other and said, well, that's probably one of the first meetings where we do have 2 women attend. Normally it's only 1. So I come from that era, really. What I keep telling young women is women are still different in business. When was attending a conference last night, and amongst the speakers was another woman, and we immediately met each other and congratulated ourselves on the choice of color, because we were both pretty colorful, else the room was pretty dull in grays and blacks and blues. Why do I say that? No matter what we do, you have a different type of, stereotyping women. I mean, if you take our 2 last chancellors, think about, obviously, again, that's way back, the discussion around his hair and his suits was probably the first time ever someone was commenting on the physical presence of a chancellor. And then when Angela Merkel took over, everyone in this country decided they had to discuss hairstyle, makeup, choice of clothing. Please. But that's the environment we're operating in. So people still do notice. And then you need to decide on how different you want to be. And I think if you want to play the gender game right, so that you actually take the merits of mixed teams, women can't be the better men. That's what you had in the 80s and 90s. Senior women tended to interact precisely the same as their male colleagues. Now that doesn't imply diversity, that's just playing roles. So we need to be different, but you cannot insist too much on being different, then you're sort of left out. I come from a home. My dad, fortunately, is a great football player. So football was something that I grew up with, and I'm a big fan of cars. Now, if you talk cars and football, obviously, and you go out with the guys in the pub in London and you drink beer, at least for starters, you're not so different. And I think no matter which kind of diverse background, you always need to make at least one step towards the other. Being too different is a challenge. And I think women need to cooperate more. Some of us have understood this pretty well, but you also have that fight amongst women where I think, well, we don't need that.
So you say, just
don't be too different, but be yourself.
Exactly. Take a little step into this direction, but keep your uniqueness there. That's cool. That's really cool. How do you educate yourself?
Not enough. No, frankly, eventually the one thing that I would probably like is 1 or 2 hours more per day. Actually, education, I noticed that the easiest way to me is personal interaction with others. So I learn a lot by simply touring the ecosystem. Sounds so fancy. It's not. By talking to different startups, learning about tech, looking at options, talking to our internal teams. Obviously, I also do read, not enough. But obviously, with a role like I currently have, you just cannot perform that without reading. However, I'm someone who's easily bored by too dull management books. So that's the one area where I do appreciate the American style of writing, in particular management help books. It's always over stereotyped, but it's far easier and more entertaining to read, so I do that. Obviously, I have a lot of blogs now that I get very regularly, just so that in the wealth of information you get what you need. I spoke to a consultant the other day who has a similar role, who said, frankly, he tries to read every single minute that he has, but still every now and again colleagues approach him and say, did you see this? Have you heard that? Look at what's happening around us. It's virtually impossible to keep track with everything. So it's really having a network also where you're sharing information. My team distributes stuff, the ecosystem distributes stuff, I distribute stuff. I think, again, it's a mixed bag of goods.
Makes absolutely sense. So what's your favorite blog and what's your favorite book?
Wow. Favorite book is difficult.
You can do favorite books.
Yeah, favorite book, I would probably say Kindle. I was one of the very first in Germany who had one because I read so much. Favorite books? I'm a huge fan, I have to admit, of something that's that probably everyone thinks, please. I love crime books, no matter what. Starting, with what is now obviously hip in Germany, those local crime scene books, up to American very known authors. So all of that. Any time of the day I love. Other than that, I'm a big fan of US management help books. And I've just been looking at them. The 1 Minute Manager series from Ken Blanchard I really, really like. And one that has helped me tremendously is the Minute Manager Meeting the Monkey. So that was more a help book, obviously. Again, very much over stereotyped, but pretty helpful. And then obviously you find a couple of books around the valley that I find fascinating right now.
So what is the book around the valley example?
What I really liked is Silicon Germany. Because a lot of stuff in there that I think if German companies take that seriously will help us, not coming from an engineering stand, but really coming from the client stand in order to develop future technology, not in the fintech sector, say, but really in every aspect of life.
Awesome. And now favorite blog?
Favorite blog right now, frankly, everyone say please. But I love Finanzszene right now. It's sort of it's the one thing every morning, even though it feels a little bit like our own news update because Deutsche has been featured pretty regularly there. But it's like a cool overview, so I like that, and it sort of helps seeing what has happened overnight and is a good prep for the day.
Awesome. So my last question is, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Relax and calm down. No, it's you were asking the MD question. If you ask me, that was never ever in my plans. I haven't gone to university. That's probably the other thing that I would have told me. Finalize something. Well, I did eventually, but I don't have a university degree. That's something that I do regret. Everyone else finds that, but still, I do regret it. I should have done that. But it's really the calm down and relax. And that's something I've never seen the career piece. No one who's seen me act has believed that. But to me, it was always I need to get the job done 100%. And now I'm not saying I shouldn't have done the 100%, but there is life outside of the 100% job perfection. And that's something where, thinking back, I think some of the more relaxed inner self that I have today would have done me good in my 20s.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And see you next time, guys.